a few months ago, it was the 50th anniversary of Hotel California by the Eagles. And I was asked to write a cover story, first for Guitar World, and then take that cover story and expand it for Classic Rock magazine. So I got to interview Bill Szymczyk, the producer of the record, and also, you know, the editor at Guitar World, when they hired me, said, you probably won't be able to get any of the guys in the Eagles. And I just thought, well, just give me a minute, you know. So my singing partner, Molly Felder, has sung background with Don Henley on his last record and toured with him a little bit. So Don knows me and knows my band Swan Dive. So I kind of had an in, and I'd interviewed him before because of that. So I went back, and he's like, sure. When I went back to my editor, it's like, oh, by the way, I got Henley. I was like, what? You know? So it's a big get, you know. We talked about a lot of things, but I think the most interesting part of the interview for me was the whole genesis of the song and the concept of Hotel California. So I think a good place to start is the opening line of that song, On a Dark Desert Highway, Cool Wind in My Hair. I mean, that really has roots in something that was a profound experience for Henley. So he grew up in Texas, and he moved to LA in 1970. And the first time he came there, he drove, and back and forth the first couple of times. Like, he would always drive. That drive would take him through the Mojave Desert. And about 90 miles outside of LA, in the Mojave Desert, apparently the city of Los Angeles will appear on the horizon. And due to a combination of smog and 8 billion watts of power and air, you know, all this different atmospheric stuff, the city will appear almost like a mirage, like a UFO. It'll glow orange and sparkle and then disappear. And so the first time Henley saw that, he was like, oh my God, what is that, you know? And then slowly realized this is Los Angeles appearing and disappearing. And, you know, you're a songwriter, you have antenna, and you start thinking, there's something beautiful about that as a metaphor. Once you start living in LA and you realize this is a city where dreamers come, and most of the time end up with broken dreams and disillusioned. So that mirage got sort of tucked in the back of his mind for Hotel California. So the way that this song started was with the Eagles guitar player, Don Felder, one of their guitar players. One morning, apparently, Felder was sitting, he had a beach house in Santa Monica. He was sitting outside, he had a 12-string guitar, and he came up with this chord progression that he liked. Put it down on tape, and, you know, as he would often do if he came up with a riff or a chord progression, put it on tape and give it to Henley and Glenn Frey, saying, like, maybe this will inspire something. So Don told me that he remembers he got a cassette tape and there were about 10 ideas on it. The first 9 were not usable, not good. And then this chord progression came on. He was like, wow, something there. And Don said there was something kind of, it's reminded me of Spain or a matador. There was something kind of mysterious about it. And he made a copy for Glenn, and they listened to it. And their first thought was, let's write a song about a matador, which they tried to do, apparently, for a couple of days, and it was going nowhere. And then Don said that they got a second idea that it would be about a hotel. That was all they had. It was like this, it would be about this hotel. A night or two after they got that concept, he and Glenn went to the opening of a Neil Simon play in Los Angeles called California Suite, which was later made into a movie with Walter Matthau, and it's a sort of vignettes that all happen in this hotel, you know, marriages coming apart and illicit love affairs. So, I mean, Don didn't come right out and say it, but the fact that it was California Suite, and they were thinking, they knew it was going to be about a hotel, and they kind of went as field research. And he didn't say, but I mean, obviously that's Hotel California, you know, it's like, thanks Neil Simon. So the song keeps evolving in a way which is kind of interesting to me. Like, they didn't write it, complete it, and then go in the studio. They went in the studio and cut the rhythm track before the song was done. So consequently, the first version that they cut, they got a really nice take of it, ended up being too fast. because once they started to refine the melody and the lyrics, they thought, we can't fit all this in, the tempo is too fast. You know, this is 1976, you can't slow things down with a software, you know, so they had to recut it. First version was cut at Criteria in Miami, second version was cut in LA at the record plant. Second version, they got an even better take of it, started working on it even more, and then they realized the key is too high. Like, by the time they got the highest note, it was just too much of a strain, and Don said, shit, you know, it's like, we have to cut it again. So they went back to Miami, you know, they're recording between these two cities, and they cut a third version, and now the song is really starting to take shape. However, Bill Szymczyk, the producer, tells me the real truth behind this is that what you hear on the record and the song that we know and love is 5 separate takes and 33 tape edits. Wow. Which, that's a lot for 1976. And again, you know, Pro Tools would allow us to just do this with flip it. Back then, it was a razor blade and 2-inch magnetic tape. And Szymczyk was really funny. I mean, he said, I was good at that, but he said, keep in mind, like, in with the band, I was also like smoking a lot of reefer and doing blow and drinking a lot in the studio, so I was not always at my best, you know, with my motor skills. So it's kind of amazing that I was able to make all these edits so cleanly.
And you got one shot at it.
One shot at it.
The first time I ever saw somebody do a tape edit, I was like, what in the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
And they would put the heads, the tape would be going across the heads. They'd be very slowly moving back and forth, trying to find like a snare beat or something, and then they just cut the damn thing and tape it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem right, but that's how it was done.
33 times. Interesting, you know, when I was talking about the key of the song, Henley told me that there was often a struggle in the Eagles about what key would be best for vocals and what key would be best for guitars. And that was going on in Hotel California because I think the previous key maybe was easier for guitars. And the key it ended up in, which is, I think, B minor, the chorus goes to G major, was sort of a compromise, you know.
Had they already worked out the ending solo at this point?
They only left space for it. Okay. So this is the song is now sort of recorded with the vocals, you know, the rhythm track is there, but there's this long space at the end. And Szymczyk said that basically it was just Joe Walsh and Don Felder and himself in the control room. The guitarists on either side of him, their amps were out in the main room. And he said, we worked on that for 2 days, just playing solo after solo, refining it. And he said it was interesting, they had such different personalities. Like Felder was very exacting, playing on top of the beat, you know, kind of mechanical. And Walsh, of course, as you might imagine, a total feel guy, kind of laid back. And they were friendly, but not friendly. So Szymczyk said it was like gunslingers. You know, it's like, okay, you think that was good, now watch this, you know. And he said those 2 days in the studio were probably his favorite 2 days of everything he ever worked on. And, you know, he worked with everybody from the James Gang on. So it's amazing to think of, first of all, those solos being sort of worked out over the space of 2 days. You know, my hunch was that they were not improvised, really, because they're so composed and stuff. But that made the song over 6 minutes long, which in 1976, that was a problem. If you wanted to release the song as a single, which the Eagles did, you know, they went to Elektra and said, this is the song that we want out first, you know. And Elektra ended up actually putting New Kid in Town out first, which was a #1. But Hotel California came next. And typical of record companies back then were like, you guys need to do an edit and get this down to 3.5 minutes for radio. And the Eagles, to their credit, said, no fucking way, we're doing that. You know, it's perfect as it is. So there was precedent, you know, Hey Jude, famously a long song, MacArthur Park. So they left it at 6.5 minutes, and I think maybe thanks to FM radio first playing it in its entirety, AM radio followed suit, and that's what you heard on the radio. There was no radio edit.
I interrupted you when you were saying that there was an argument about, do we change the key for vocals or for guitar?
Right.
I'm really surprised the Eagles, a band with so many great singers, where the voices are such an important part, that would even be an argument.
I thought so too.
And Henley's personality.
Yeah, right. Very sort of controlling personality in a way, and very, very strong. So when he said that, it did surprise me. But maybe at the same time, because one of the missions behind Hotel California, when they brought Joe Walsh on board, was that they wanted to be more rock. That was the way they were going to transcend the country rock tag, by turning up the amps and having Walsh not only like a great guitar player, but kind of being a bad boy and stuff. And that was funny too. You know, Henley was talking about when they first brought Walsh on board. He said that that was a time when Walsh was hanging around with Keith Moon a lot.
There's a combination.
Yeah, so he learned from Keith Moon the whole idea of trashing hotel rooms. So, you know, prior to Walsh, the Eagles were pretty well behaved as a band. But here now they're staying at these fancy hotels, and Walsh is, you know, trashing the room, tearing up the wallpaper, throwing televisions out there. And they're getting a reputation, which on one hand, Don said is, I guess, good for business, because like we're bad boys, but also it's like we like these hotels, like we want to be able to come back, you know. So they had to kind of find a happy medium there. But I think that's one of the reasons that the guitar became even, you know, it had been important in songs like Already Gone and things like that, but even more important. And you think about Life in the Fast Lane, that was a big guitar song, really different for the Eagles, you know.
For somebody our age, that album was frickin' everywhere.
Everywhere.
For a long
time.
In Hotel California, I have a dear friend, I remember in 92, she did the backpack across Europe thing with her friends, and she comes back with this story about these cute guys in Italy, and they didn't speak any English, and they couldn't communicate, and one of them had a guitar, and he just starts playing Hotel California, and these American girls from the Midwest all start singing with these Italian guys, and they all sing together and have this beautiful moment, and then they go their separate ways. Like the power of a song, man, to just go across cultures like that.
Yeah, I mean, you think about radio back then, the way it united everybody from city to city, you know. I'll tell you one more funny thing about Hotel California. So, of course, very famous, iconic record cover, which is a photograph that was taken of the Beverly Hills Hotel, very famous hotel in LA, built in, I think, 1932, pink stucco, this, you know, all these movie stars had stayed there, and secret affairs had been carried on there. If this was the modern era and you were a band and you decided we want to have an image of the Beverly Hills Hotel on our cover, there would be avenues that you would need to go through to get permissions, you know. The Eagles did not go through those avenues. Basically, what they did is they hired a photographer in a truck who drove up to the front of the Beverly Hills Hotel at dusk one night, had a cherry picker, went up, got a couple of aerial shots, got in the truck and whizzed away. So no permissions. So the record came out, and as you say, the popularity of it was so profound that in the first week it went platinum. That was really rare back in 1976 for anything to sell that many in a week. And of course, within that first week, the Beverly Hills Hotel got wind of, it's like, wait a minute, that's our hotel on the cover. So they filed a $1 million lawsuit against the Eagles, saying you used this without permission. So by the time, you know, all the legal paperwork started to get done and the teams were getting ready for court cases, you know, maybe a month later, the hotel started to realize, wait a minute, like, bookings have tripled because everybody wants to stay at the same hotel that's on the cover of the Eagles album, so they quietly dropped the suit. Yeah.
When I thought the story that you were going to tell me about the cover was, I remember being a kid in Middle America and watching Jimmy Swaggart or something.
Oh, there's that aspect too.
And he's going on about how there's Anton LaVey as the figure in the window. And I remember me and my cousin like, what? And we went and got the album, and we looked it up, and we're like, cool. You know, the Eagles are evil even. This is great.
No, I mean, that did come up in the interview with Henley, and he said all of that stuff, just like the Paul is Dead stuff, was completely coincidental and accidental, nothing that we did intentionally. But again, good for business because people talk about it, and it's like it's almost an extra curricular aspect of a record that's already great musically. And now you have people like looking for clues. And
anything that sells that much and becomes so much part of the culture, a mythology is going to be born around it.
Yeah.
And I think that would be it. It wasn't it in the top 10 highest selling albums forever?
It was number 3, and the number 1 was the Eagles' greatest hits. And I still think that might be, the Eagles' greatest hits might be, I don't know, with Taylor Swift on the scene now, maybe it's different, but for decades it was the number 1 selling.
And this is when just simply streaming something on your phone didn't count. You had to go to a store, buy a physical piece of it, when the population of the country was way less than it is now.
Yeah.
And so that added up quick, and it did not count when you joined Columbia Record Club and got 20 for a penny or whatever. Those didn't count, so there's all of those that were bought even.
Yeah.
I'm not putting down the metrics we use today, but it's completely different.
It is.
You said New Kid in Town earlier.
Yeah. Love that song.
We all have this moment when we've heard something too much, a band too much. Whenever I've been in that place about the Eagles, I'd just one day be listening to the radio and hear a New Kid in Town, and it always draws me right back, like, oh my God, these guys were great.
I asked Henley about that song, and he was very modest about it. He said, even though it's attributed to J.D. Souther, Glenn, and myself, he said, I didn't have that much to do with it. Like, I contributed some of the lyrics, but it was mostly J.D.'s idea that he brought in. So all of those, there's those clever kind of key changes that happen in that song, and some really sophisticated chords and harmony going on. It's J.D. Souther, I asked Don, because that song has such beautiful vocal harmony, I asked him about how the Eagles worked out their vocal harmonies. And he said it was really just that we had sung together for so long that we would just get in there and just through trial and error, like nothing ever got written down, or nobody ever said, hey, you should sing a 6th or a 3rd here. It was just kind of, we gravitated because of our ranges to certain registers and certain parts. And he said it's just the advantage of singing together with somebody for a really long time, And, they obviously had that magic blend, like the Beatles, where especially Henley and Fry, when their voices came together, it created this kind of third thing, like this voice that was somehow both of them, but neither of them, I can tell you something funny about Life in the Fast Lane.
Yeah, please.
That song started from Joe Walsh doing a finger exercise that he would do every night backstage, which was basically the opening riff of Life in the Fast Lane. It was a kind of complex, across the strings picking thing that he felt was a good way to warm up before shows. And one night he was playing it in the dressing room, and apparently Glenn Fry came in and said, like, what the hell is that? You play it every night. And he's like, I don't know, it's just an exercise. And he goes, it's more than an exercise. Like, it needs to be in a song, So the riff kind of became the beginning of this song. Now, famously, and this, Henley didn't tell me this, but I've read it, Walsh said it, and Fry, when he was alive, also said it, that the concept and the title of the song came from a real-life event where Fry was in a car in LA with his dealer, and they were on their way to a poker game for some reason. And this guy, it's hard to believe in LA that they were on a highway and had a free lane to speed, but he said they were going really fast. And, the guy was probably coked up a little bit. And Fry got scared, and he said, hey man, you need to slow down. You're kind of scaring me. And apparently the dealer just turned and said, this is Life in the Fast Lane, dude. So, it was a good story. I mean, it sounds plausible because, of course, the Eagles did have dealers back then. So that title, again, became, like Hotel California, a good metaphor, not just for drugs, but just like living fast and exceeding your your lifestyle in different ways. And then they just wrote it in the studio,
Did your family have that record?
Oh yeah, I had it.
You got it?
When that record came out, I was 12, and I know this sounds hard to believe, but I had a job at 12 working Saturdays at a record store in Morristown, New Jersey called Looney Tunes. I was in there so much as a customer that one day they just said, we should hire this kid. He's always like straightening out the racks and stuff. So they said, he's underage, we can't pay him. We'll just pay you in records. So it was a used record store that also sold new vinyl. So I remember in 1976, there's a handful of records, Joni Mitchell, Hajira, Steely Dan, Royal Scam, Eagles, Hotel California, that I bought the day they came out,
That's a good one, man.
Yeah. Henley, like, say, Billy Joel, is somebody who has a pretty thorny reputation, especially with journalists and the press. But I had never interviewed him before Molly met him, and the way that she met him, Henley heard Swan Dive on XM Sirius, and he got in touch with the disc jockey of the show and said, could you tell me who is that singer in that band, Swan Dive? And then actually called Molly on the telephone. And, she didn't believe it was, she was like, yeah, right. Because she grew up in Texas. I mean, the Eagles were everything to her. And he's like, no, this is really Don Henley. I was wondering if you'd want to sing on this record I'm making in Nashville. So when I heard that, I was like, how couldn't I love him,